Hello, good afternoon, students and listeners. Welcome to a special discussion on alienation and social process. This is part of the program of the Faculty of Sociology, School of Social Sciences. Well, before we begin with the discussion, I would like to introduce one of my colleagues here, who is sitting right before us here. He is Dr. T. Kapoor. He is one of the most senior faculty member of the Faculty of Sociology, IGNOU. And to his credit, he has worked quite a lot on alienation, identity, and so on and so forth. So in this area, he is, I think, quite exposed to this discourse. And to his credit, he has also published lots of he has so many publications, both in terms of books and papers. And he has taught here for so many years at IGNOU here, in this faculty, and we are lucky to have him today. Of course, I'm also from the Faculty of Sociology, and with my exposure to the topic of this alienation and social process, as a sociological topic, I would also be part of this discussion. So both of us will try to make you understand the topic of alienation and social process. Well, before we go into the discussion yet, we have tried to let you understand in terms of, we have some layout here so that you better understand it well in a better way. Perhaps these are subtopics. So we'll begin somewhat like this concept of alienation. We'll try to clarify on this concept. Then we'll try to touch something on the features of alienation. Then so many concepts, clarifications will come, like a surplus value, or emergence of class, or it may be in terms of dehumanization of labor, relations of labor, mode of production. All those concepts will also come in the midst of our discussion. Then we'll also try to let you know the types of alienation. They may be part of sociological and even non-sociological, but when we discuss something on alienation, it's good to know all these types of alienation. Then we'll also try to understand the main important point, which we shall call the process, because concept alienation itself is a process. So the process of alienation will be part of our discussion. Then some other concepts of like division of labor and alienation, as you know, understood by Karl Marx or Durkheim or Max Weber, and so on and so forth. All those components also will be part of our discussion. Then we'll also try to touch something on the capitalist mode of production, alienation in the modern, postmodern era, then alienation and class polarization, alienation and social change, social movement, resistance movement, and alienation and IT, that is information technology, globalization, consumerism, and the future of alienation. So we have earmarked some of these points. Maybe if we have time, we'll try to cover all this. Otherwise, we'll try to pick up some of the more important points that we think you should take it at this discourse. Well, now let's begin with the concept of alienation. Before I give to my co-panel here, I would like to say something on alienation. So alienation, by definition, we have different definitions, but what we generally understand sociologically by the term alienation is a kind of estrangement of an individual or social group, or maybe a community. In the kind of world that they exist. Or in other words, this is a kind of process, a type of process, where an individual or a group becomes foreign to the environment that they live in. So this is another easier way of understanding. One becomes a foreign in the environment or social environment that he or she lives in. So in that system of environment, if I'm not into that, fitting so much into that because of various factors, maybe psychological, maybe sociological, maybe economic, maybe political, all of that sort, then I or somebody may get alienated. So this concept has so many types, sociological, psychology, economic, or so on. Now, this kind of alienation, this process happens even in great religions of the world, in most of the great religions of the world. Just as an example, I would like to give, not in terms of specific example, most of the great religions of the world, they believe that there was a harmony. Then later there was some sort of rupture or some conflict in the process. Then they also believe that someday that harmony will return back. You know? So these things is the hope of religion. And so in between there will also be conflicts, alienation, because of some rupture or whatever. So even in great religions, it takes place. And so much into the daily, even social lives that we experience. So I think talking about alienation is very important. But when we talk of alienation, some may talk of even individual, personal, context, which is usually more taken up by psychologists. And some would like to talk about of groups, social groups, community, in the collective level. So sociologists would be more interested in talking about all these related to social groups, societal groups. And of course, some other social scientists will also talk about something related to identity and also political and also conflict-ridden aspects. For example, political scientists would like to focus more on these political aspects, for example. Of course, not less for this sociologists. Sociologists also take up political issues, of course, because they are part of the societal process. So like this, there are so many contextualizations and emphasis given in the discourse of each discipline. Well, this is just to start with. Now I think Dr. Kapoor will say something on this concept and some of these subtopics that you would like the students to understand.
Thank you, Vasham, and thank you also for the rather flattering introduction to your co-panel. And I think you've laid out the initial contours of this discussion very well, but I would also like to have my take on the concept of alienation, because I feel that if the students and listeners at least get the concept clear, it would make a very crucial difference to the way they view the world. Because alienation is at least partly a vision of the world for the person who is alienated. I think Vasham has explained about the estrangement of the individual, estrangement of the community, ethnicity, and minority groups and so on. Therefore, I am also interested in saying a few words about the concept of alienation. I mean, if you look at alienation, the spelling of the word, the first part of it is A-L-I-E-N, alien. And I think therein lies the cue. An alien is something foreign to the situation, different from the society, and ultimately coming from a different social world. So when alienation is referred to, we refer to people who feel they don't belong. They do not belong to the organization they are working in. They don't feel a sense of job satisfaction where they are employed. And later on perhaps we'll discuss in more detail, but it could be mentioned that, for instance, organizations which work in a bureaucratic fashion, which have paperwork, which have records, which have files, which have procedures, which have statutes, which have got constitutional facilities within the framework of work, in all of these, the fact of the matter is that Marx's allegation, which has proved out to be an observation rather than an allegation, it seems that human beings have not been able to figure out a system in which they can work also, at the same time they can grow themselves and feel a sense of satisfaction at the job which they are doing. Now the classic example which bears repetition again and again is the fact that of the assembly worker. The assembly worker is considered to be one of the models of alienation. In Charlie Chaplin's movie Modern Times, they show a particular scene in which there is a line of people, young people, who are working, and their only job is to put 2 tightening turns to a screw when the conveyor belts comes in front of them. And for hours that's all they're doing, so that by the time they have ended their work, their hands are automatically flexing in that particular gyratory motion. Nothing to do with the brain in terms of thinking, nothing to do with getting rich. It's only a question of somehow you have to eke out a living, and therefore you are willing to do the most estranging, alienating of jobs. This is on the economic front. But alienation stretches outwards from the economic front, I would say, to all aspects of society. If a worker is alienated in the place where he is working, he is estranged from that situation. In short, he is unhappy and disturbed, depressed, and feeling that he is being exploited, used by the capitalist, then naturally there is a sociological dimension to it. Apart from his relations with the other workers in the factory, where there will be a level of sharing and sort of grieving with one another at the kind of situation they are finding themselves in, there is also a fallout on the family, on the society at large, because it's not easy and hardly anyone can switch on and switch off from the work they are doing. If the work is giving them satisfaction, they have job satisfaction and have good relations in the family. But family relations get soured if the boss has called a group of laborers and giving them a talking to and giving them threats of throwing them out of the organization if they don't buck up and increase the productivity. It creates a sense of tension, stress. And this is carried by the laborer or the worker back to his home, and he might find it very convenient to get rid of all those unpleasantness, the behavior and the conduct of the bosses and the higher supervising people, and take home with him a bottle of alcohol and drink it, and then start having fights or beating up his wife or his children. So it has very wide ramifications. I think we will be talking a little bit about also how we can resolve it. But Max Weber pointed out that even in bureaucratic organizations which have become almost the feature of modern society, there needs to be a lot done before the humanistic side of technology starts to have a human face, starts to give hope to the people, and is not a monster in which there is the nuclear war on one side, there is the space exploration in another side, there is the militarization or demilitarization in yet another sphere. And so we find that alienation enters as soon as there is interaction in terms of economic production. It has its effects on the society and the social side of it. And what's worse, it gets embedded in the psychology of the group, in the psychology of the individual, and makes him feel less self-confident, makes him feel as if he is not worth worth, his own self-estimation goes down, he's not worth in the eyes of others, and this is a dehumanizing process. From a normal individual who joined with hope, with the anticipation of doing something for the organization, for his family, he finds himself struggling with situations in which any and every excuse is used to throw the boss's tension on the workers, to throw the boss's responsibilities on the workers, and then extract from the worker much more than what he is paid. This is the basic approach so far as surplus value is concerned, which is one of the very key factors in discussing alienation. And I think that Vasham would definitely have something to say on this or any other aspect of alienation. I have tried to delineate certain graphs, certain sociographs and psychographs in which the emotions, the feelings, the thoughts, psychological processes, sociological processes, that is, are indicated. But there are many other facets of alienation equally disturbing, and perhaps we need to take a look at some of that.
Yeah, well, I was so much interested when you talked about the process or the concept of dehumanization of labor. Of course, this is part of, I think, Marxist analysis also. And of course, so many sociologists would also agree with this, you know, this concept and the process. When you talk of dehumanization of labor, we are also trying to touch something on surplus value, or even emergence of social classes because of various push and pull factors. When someone is not happy, someone thinks in terms of something else which usually is not very productive. And a negative thinker would even go to the extreme line of thinking, and sometimes that is, and most of the time, that is not good for the society. We also have some sort of terrorism taking place almost every day in this modern world. Of course, not all terrorists, not all kinds of terrorisms are the same. But there are also reasons why even terrorism takes place. So all these things would also can be linked when you talk about alienation also. Some societies, they feel they are sidetracked, they're sidelined, they are not attended, their views are not taken, their interests are not attended. And so they start with movements. And they also start protesting. It takes in the form of even armed struggle, and it is also reinforced by some other ideological, components. They organize themselves, they fight against the so-called mainland or the state, and they fight even among the neighbors also. So this kind of things is like a chain reaction that has been happening as we see in our everyday experience. But this is just one part of it. Of course, there are different types of movements also. And some people feel that they are marginalized. We can take, for example, the marginalization of women, for example. Women say they are marginalized, and they are marginalized by the so-called the man, the patriarchal master. The males oppresses, or the males oppress females in some way, or in many ways. So they feel alienated even from the main, discourse or the self-discourse. They say those things are not meant for women, and they are just meant for men. So why should we participate? Why should we be part of it? After all, we're not going to have our share there. So this kind of even thinking also takes place in many of the social processes. And we have seen in many societies also. So feminist groups will come up and say, we have a share to stake, and we are also equal human being, if not more. So these are the words coming out from women's side also. And these feminist movements are also taking place, or even lesser, there are also so many women movements which they don't like to be identified as feminist movements. Well, so this is part of marginalization, or this is what they call gender discrimination also. Then apart from that, we also have other sections of people. Dr. Kapoor had mentioned something on economic sphere. So we have laborers, for example. And we also can go in even to the extent of the packers category, for example. They are alienated from the mainstream way of living. So they have become like, sometimes psychopaths as some would take it, they are just sucking the blood of the common man. And some would say, no, they should not be on the street, they should work. And some would think that they have deliberately tried to become packer and make money in some way. So there are different way of thinking. But then they must also have their share of problems and burden that some would also think. I do think they have also reasons, but this is not the time for this argument for all that. But then they are somehow eliminated from the main societal process. They become like another category of people. Like in a state, in a nation, so many people, so many groups of people, so many categories of people. And so now, going a bit further and a bit larger analysis, we can go to the kind of Marxist analysis, what Karl Marx would think of the happenings of the time and what would happen even in the future, which is still taking place, I think, more or less, till this date, or maybe it will take place in the future also. The kind of understanding that he has, for example, the problem of the haves and the have-nots, for example. The haves are supposed to be powerful people because they control everything in this capitalist. He was talking of this capitalist setup. The haves will be the producers or the managers, for example, the bourgeois, the owners, and they control everything. They have even the means of production. When we say the means of production, they have all the capital in their hand, they have all the control, they have all the machines they would like to install, they have all the house or factory that they would like to institute, or industries, whatever. And the workers are poor people, powerless people, of course, initially. Because they just come in to get some money for their living. Actually, that money and the work that they do, according to Karl Marx, are not proportionate at all. The servants are made to even work more for more hours, so that the proprietor or the manager or the owner gets more money. And so he tries to make money out of the extra work, extra time that the workers would put in. Whereas the workers will get just the same amount, which is so meager, just for their survival. And Karl Marx would say that, yes, this will not go on and on always. Someday there should be some changes. And he tries to think in terms of organizing the lower income group people, which he terms as oppressed lots, so that they organize themselves. And from these people, the proletariats, which he also calls, there will be a movement. And that movement will be against those owners who had oppressed them. And only after that would there be some, balance, which he thinks in terms of bringing harmony to the society, because the powers will be shared then. And if not, Karl Marx would, I feel he has also the line of thinking that the proletariats, those workers, someday should rule over those people who had ruled them once. I think he had that feeling also, so that there will be, harmony in the future. Balance of power will be there. Income will also be equal or almost equal, so that they can also, live as a respectable and honorable human being. So he calls restoring of harmony of humanity, some would call it. So this is in terms of economic and social aspect. Now, little bit on, these ethnic problems, identity problems. Now we can take the example of India as a state. And India is having lots of cultures, having lots of various languages, linguistic groups, and even having lots of, regions, which makes India, even the governors, the runners of the government, difficult to manage. India is, of course, as we all know, it is kind of unity in diversity, so many things, in many levels there are differences, but then in some way people become one in the state. But there are not many, there are some people, some sections of groups who do not buy this theory. They say we are different people, because the kind of historical process that have come, we have been neglected a lot in terms of economic autonomy, in terms of political autonomy, in terms of resources management and control of management. So we see even alienation of people. You can think of the Northeast people, for example. And one of the best examples can be taken of Assam, the state of Assam. So in Assam there are, militant movements, now led by ULFA and some other groups, also Boros and others also. They say we have been alienated for quite some time. And they say, now we want to live our own. So those, line of thinking makes them act, and that becomes a conflict for both the Indian state and those people who are protesting. In some other level, a bit different category, some would say that we cannot have the kind of living that we want. Now every decision is taken by the center, by Delhi. Whatever we want to have, whatever our tradition says is good, whatever we believe is good, is not, happening, because it is controlled by somewhere which is not ours. And so people feel alienated. You say, we are just living as toys, as commodity, and so what is the word of our life if we go on living like this? So some people, some groups, communities also take up movements against this. And they try for, autonomy, special autonomy, statehood, and all this and that. So these are also some of the aspects. Now I think we should also touch something on this postmodern view also, and the polarization of classes. Now I've touched a little bit on class, but you can still, add something to that about the class, emergence of class and their alienation, and even the postmodern view of, this alienation and social process, so that students will have more update on the present contemporary situation also.
Well, thank you, Asham. I think I was myself contemplating on saying a few words on this very important aspect of alienation, which is postmodern approach to it. The first point I think we should make, we have talked a little bit about alienation. A little bit of postmodernism would be that, first of all, it is a movement or a state of being which is witnessed more or less in megapolitans, metropolises, huge conglomerations of communities and property and action going on. And it's not so much applicable to the alienation which say a villager in a factory would be operating upon, because this is the gift, so to speak, the double-edged gift of the modern is the postmodern society, where once again there is a problem of continuity. There's once again a problem of the assembly line. There's once again a problem of tasks being given to very many different people and then being coordinated by one personal manager or something. And actually this leads me to say that perhaps Karl Marx definitely anticipated that if socialism didn't go right, it would turn into postmodernism. And I think that's exactly what has happened. The communist experiment, though it was a great experiment, didn't deliver the goods. I mean, socialism in the sense of a utopia where everybody has common property, and it is a state property, but everyone has an equal right to it, and therefore the very root of alienation, which was the economic process in terms of Marx's vision, that cannot come about. So utopia is blocked off by alienation, and if there is a method by which human beings in their economic sphere are a happy lot and they feel that they are being appreciated and being compensated fairly, this would lead to a great deal of improvement in societal condition, including crime, violence, problems of the minorities. I think for Marx this was a central process, and looking at the postmodern alienation of people in which they don't fit into the metropolitan, they develop deviance, and deviance is one of the most important factors in an urban situation, in an urban postmodern situation. In fact, I think one of the most gruesome postmodern murders and serial murders have just taken place a few days or a week ago, in which a businessman in Delhi used to lure children into his house with the help of his servant, abuse them, kill them, throw them down the drain. And when they report to the police, they didn't take any action, and now there is a great deal of hullabaloo going on. After all this has been over, six cops have been suspended, 3 have been given some notice, and an investigation is going on. This is the postmodern condition, where in the midst of speeches about humanity, in the midst of speeches about value education and morality and so on, we find that our next door neighbor, virtually, we don't know who he is, what he is doing, whether it is a crime, whether it is a business. There has been a complete disintegration of the process of community building. In postmodern societies, communities are only virtual communities. We are dealing mostly with machines, we are dealing mostly with our own personal problems. In a metropolitan in India like Delhi, it's difficult even to have discourse with your neighbors. Everybody is on his own trip. So Marx had anticipated this, that if the utopian socialism didn't come about, then there would be a further deterioration of the situation. And now it is being taught even in schools that to compete and be ruthless and to get to the top in your profession is the right thing to do. There's no question of talking about values, morality and everything. That's why it's called postmodern, where everything has become out of control, out of gear. They are not looking at sustainability, but just going on blindly. What I mean is that if there are 20 brands of cars, what is the necessity of producing another 20 brand of cars? But that is the capitalist logic. Unless the capitalist makes everybody into a consumer, he is not going to get that money for his expensive hobbies. So this in brief is the general situation in the postmodern pockets of the world, because postmodernism spreads only by diffusion to the countryside, where you will find a reflection of the kind of goods and consumerism which is taking place, but that's a mere shadow. One example which comes to my mind is that of the singer Michael Jackson, which you may have heard of. It is reputed that in half an hour he spent $3 million in shopping. It's yet another thing that how he survived, the fact that he went broke and was in debt, had to leave his country, had to go to Bahrain. But this is the behavior. The postmodern superstar wants super attention for himself, and he's willing to go broke, throw away all his money, just in half an hour, $3 million, when the man hasn't got money to pay back his debtors. This is the kind of condition, and I have got nothing against Michael Jackson. I think he's a great singer, but this example came to my mind. So this brings us, I think, to a little bit of alienation, information technology, globalization, consumerism, all of which we a little bit touched upon. But I think that there needs to be some few minutes that we have left. We could utilize one or two of them to think of what would lead to a better world, a better situation. And what comes to my mind is some of the units which I wrote in our Sociology of Religion course for MA, where we find that it's important for a person to not be alienated from the self. The self meaning the inner conscience of a person, the inner soul of a person should not be alienated. But alienation is such a cancerous process that ultimately it goes down to the marrow, it goes down to the soul. And soul alienation is the destruction of a person. The society has destroyed a part of itself, and that's why I would still say that the Marxian view has got a lot to offer, because now it is conflict within the self. You have no one to talk to. You have no one to express your agony. Nobody is there to share your problem. It has become an individuated world without the individuals becoming fully integrated themselves. And this becomes a problem. If a fully integrated person, if a whole person is a capitalist, then that particular capitalist would make sure that he takes the minimum amount of profit and the rest is distributed amongst the workers. This requires a change in the values of society, and therefore value education has become a most important aspect of our educational system, and some kind of headway is being made along that direction. But once it is established, it is important to be a human being with values, with certain morality, with certain vision, with a certain integrity. And this is drummed in from the school level, not only through words, but through example, that there is a possibility of this, of us, of this whole of humanity, managing to survive the great and global impact of consumerism and exploitation, and maybe we'd be able to do something to make, as Michael Jackson put it, a better world. So Vasham, we'll have to wind up now, some time is left.
Oh, well, I think you have projected the future in a very good way. As a religious, great preacher trying to console people. But well, people may have different perspectives, but all will try to come to a point where everybody likes harmony at the end. Maybe everybody likes a peaceful, harmonious life, at least at the end, at the later stage, or at least in the future. But now the problem is whether the context that we are now is any near to that dream. I would rather call it somewhat utopian. Anyway, those now, like what Gandhi she was saying, for him even the freedom is in his heart. The freedom, he may not have it with his own hand, but it is all present in his inner self. I think this is what makes him very strong. Even if he loses many things which others would call it freedom, he would say freedom is still in his inner self. So I think even the British might have learned a lot from Gandhiji, that such a strong person thinking that freedom is not outside, it is within oneself, within inside. So likewise, like you have suggested, maybe we have to learn how to cope with the kind of stress that we live in, the kind of crisis that we live in. And at the same time, I think we'll have to also try to make effort, maybe organize effort, to see that some, the way to harmony becomes easier. Because like Michael Jackson and our lives will be quite different. The gap, even in terms of economy, even in terms of political power, or even in terms of what powers, you can name anything, or even resources, there has been a huge gap between humanities now. So I think we'll have to, if we don't create it, then maybe we don't get it in the future also. Well, I think we should try to wind up with this because maybe time is already running out. But I think we should, but now I would like to just wind it up by saying that this topic of alienation and social process is part of the topics in MSO 001 and ESO 16. And this topic is, of course, one of the important topics in sociological discourses also. And we have tried to contextualize with the local context in India so much. And of course, we have taken so many examples of Karl Marx and other contributors to the concept of understanding of alienation. Well, next time when we get another time, we'll try to expound more on this topic also, or related topics, so that the students are also linked to some other important related topics of alienation and social process. For now, I think it is goodbye from both of us. Thank you.